Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jesse Rothstein. I'm the Carmel Friesen Professor of Public Policy, the David Gardner Professor of Higher Education, and most importantly, the Director of the Center for Studies in Higher Education. I'm very happy to welcome you today to the second part of our Kerr lecture series for this year, titled The American University in Crisis, Contested Missions. The Kerr Lecture is a biennial series hosted by the Center for Studies in Higher Education. It honors Clark Kerr, president of the University of California from 1958 to 1967, and long recognized as one of the great leaders of American higher education. This year, we're honored to have as our Clark Kerr lecturer, President Christopher Eisgruber of Princeton University. I also want to mention some of our great University of California leaders who have joined us for this. I think we'll make it a very interesting session. So we have here with us UC President James Milliken, UC Berkeley Chancellor Rich Lyons, UC Berkeley Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Ben Hermelin. I think we have UC Berkeley Chancellor Emerita Carol Christ. I haven't seen her yet, but I think she's here. UC Provost and Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs Catherine Newman, David Wilson, Dean of the Goldman School, and others who I apologize that I'm not including you to get to the lecture. I want to, before we start, share a few ground rules. We ask for mutual respect toward our speaker and your fellow guests. Please remain seated during the presentation. Please take a moment now to silence your cell phones. After the talk, we're going to have a Q&A session. We're going to use the index card method for it. You may have picked up index cards as you walked in. We'll pass others out. Please write any questions you have down on index cards. People will come down the aisles to collect them, and we'll ask the questions from them. We will not be taking questions from the floor. Thank you for your cooperation in making this a respectful and insightful event. One other logistical matter I'll mention is that following the Q&A, we'll be having an opportunity to purchase copies of President Eisgruber's latest book, Terms of Respect. And I believe we'll do that up here. So if you're interested, you can get it. Okay, with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Rich Lyons, UC Berkeley's 12th Chancellor. As he took office in, there he comes. As he took office in July 2024, Chancellor Lyons brought a remarkable legacy to this role. As former dean of the UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, a distinguished economist, and a passionate advocate for innovation and entrepreneurship, he embodies leadership that inspires progress. As the first alumnus of the university to serve as chancellor, he brings a profound love and a deep regard for the university, which he sees as one of society's greatest assets. Rich is committed to launching a new era of excellence for our country's leading public university, while at the same time working to protect the essential freedoms to teach, learn, and discover on this campus. Please join me in welcoming Chancellor Rich Lyons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks to all of you for being here. And I'm just going to thank Chris right out of the box. It is so exciting to have our colleague here. So good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this Clark Kerr lecture. I'd especially like to welcome our UC president, University of California president, J.B. Milliken, who is also here with us, and also our distinguished honoree, Chris Eisgruber, for joining us. It's a wonderful occasion. This lecture series is a wonderful part of this remarkable university. It was 2001 that the University of California and the Carnegie Corporation established the Clark Kerr Lectures on, quote, the role of higher education in society. Here we are 25 years down the road, and that role is as much contested as it's ever been in any of our lifetimes. Organized by our wonderful Center for Studies in Higher Education at Berkeley, this lecture series provides an important campus venue for leading scholars and practitioners to share, also to reflect upon their thoughts about major policy issues facing higher education. For those who may be unfamiliar with our Center for Studies in Higher Education, or CSHE as we sometimes call it, it plays an essential role for facilitating crucial, constructive, nuanced dialogue about higher education by virtue of research, training, and outreach, those three areas that it engages in. The center's work and ethos align perfectly with one of Berkeley's most treasured attributes, namely our abiding interest in constantly questioning the status quo. This mindset, there's got to be a better way to do this. That's as wired into Berkeley as any institution I know. Now more than ever, we need and we benefit from our center's unfettered engagement with the strategic issues in higher education, and it's our relentless push for forward thinking among today's university leadership. It's only fitting that this lecture honors Clark Kerr, one of our great leaders and scholars in higher education in America, his vision of the university as a public trust, where all thoughtful ideas can be fully examined. This demands our continued support. I've been reflecting on Clark Kerr's insistence that the university exist not as an isolated ivory tower, but, quote, instead, inside a general social fabric of a given era, end quote. The, quote, lines dividing what is internal from what is external become quite blurred, end quote, he said. An important reminder for a university like ours, dedicated to advancing the greater good, but also a sobering truth as we are now confronting the challenges born of threats to long-standing norms and values, reductions in federal research funding, and public skepticism about the worth and relevance of college education. These times and these challenges make it all the more important to recognize, celebrate, and honor those leaders who stand out in the tricky terrain of American higher education. And with that, I'm honored to introduce J.B. Milliken, our president of the University of California. President Milliken is a national leader in public higher education with more than 30 years of experience leading 4 different public university systems in 4 different states: Nebraska, New York, Texas, and now California. He held faculty appointments at each of those institutions in law, in education, in public policy. Our president has dedicated his career to driving student success, to expanding access and affordability, to increasing social mobility, to growing the research enterprise, and building academic health programs to develop the next generation of our healthcare providers. I turn it over to J.B. Milliken. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Lyons. It's my honor to join all of you today at this lecture series honoring Clark Kerr, a man who had such a profound impact on not only the University of California, but higher education writ large and the state of California. As most of you know, he earned his PhD at UC Berkeley in 1939. He returned to the faculty at the end of World War II. During the McCarthy era, he defended colleagues who refused to sign a loyalty oath demanded by the UC Board of Regents. This act of defiance earned him admiration among his colleagues and eventually led to his appointment as UC Berkeley's first chancellor in 1952. 5 years later, he was named the 12th president of the University of California. In that role, he was the principal author of the California Master Plan for Higher Education, one of the most influential documents in the history of American higher education. It offered a thoughtful blueprint to help public higher education meet the rapidly evolving needs in California and in the second half of the 20th century. At UC, Kerr oversaw the openings of new campuses at San Diego, Irvine, and Santa Cruz. He changed the trajectory of the university, and in so doing, changed the trajectory of the state, and he helped redefine what's possible for public higher education. In the almost 70 years since Kerr took the helm at UC, his ideas continue to influence universities in California and beyond. These many decades later, we still grapple with how to best promote free speech, access, affordability, student success, research, and academic quality. Over the past several years in particular, as Rich mentioned, higher education has experienced heightened public scrutiny, accused of being too costly, lacking relevance to the job market, fostering a climate of political indoctrination. These pressures have raised fundamental questions about trust in our colleges and universities. And in addition, we're now grappling with rapidly accelerating technological change and its impact on the academy. There are few people more qualified to talk about these challenges and the opportunities that they present than Princeton University President Christopher Eisgruber. He joined the Princeton faculty in 2001, I must say, after a distinguished career as a law professor at my alma mater. Served as scholar of constitutional law and public affairs, spent 9 years as provost, and then became Princeton's 20th president in July 2013. President Eisgruber has worked to increase the representation of low-income and first-generation students at Princeton and other colleges and universities. He's emphasized the importance of free speech and inclusivity to Princeton's mission and championed the university's commitment to public service, research, and liberal arts education. President Eisgruber is one of the leading voices in higher education today, and he has contributed much through his speaking, his writing, and recently his service as the immediate past president of the Association of American Universities. His work and advocacy have consistently reflected a profound belief in the power of universities to strengthen democracy. I look forward to his remarks today. I'm certain he will help us think about how institutional leadership helps shape and is shaped by the broader political and social environment. Please join me in welcoming President Christopher Eisgruber.
Thank you for that. That was really generous. Thank you. Well, thank you, President Milliken, Chancellor Lyons, other distinguished leaders of this university, and friends. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to be here at this magnificent university. American universities today are in crisis. They confront a danger that Clark Kerr identified in his Godkin Lectures more than 6 decades ago. The federal government is wielding its tremendous power over research funding to limit academic freedom, both in fields that the government subsidizes and in others that it does not. Universities also face challenges that Kerr himself experienced when he was fired from his presidency here in California. In some states, officials are using their control over public colleges and universities to punish teaching and research with which they disagree. On Tuesday, I described 3 structural trends that have reshaped American universities in the years since Kerr delivered his lectures at Harvard. These were, first, the rising importance of student borrowing as a source of university revenue. Second, the intensification of stratified national competition. And third, the prominent role of colleges and universities in addressing issues of racial equality. All 3 developments imperil public support for the mission of universities, a mission that is already controversial in democratic societies because great universities inevitably have both elitist and disruptive characteristics. This afternoon, I want to offer some observations about how university communities should meet the crisis threatening our institutions. I will argue, first, that we must defend academic freedom and ground it firmly in the research mission of our institutions. Second, that we must articulate and adhere rigorously to a vision of education that is intimately connected to the values and conduct of research. And third, that we need to embrace rather than resist thoughtful economic measures for the value of the education that we provide. Let me begin by saying a few words about a question that find the clicker here. Let me begin by saying a few words about a question that I hear frequently, which is, given the severity of the attacks on academic freedom, why aren't more university presidents speaking up? Part of the answer is obvious. Presidents worry that speaking up for higher education might subject their own institutions to attack. And I should say, it's always hard to be a university president. It is especially so in this era. And I respect the work that all of my colleagues across the country are doing. To what I've just said, one might add that even in ordinary times, university presidents must be cautious. Clark Kerr later said that he regretted delivering his highly esteemed Godkin Lectures in 1963. Here's his quote. I'll read it to you. "The almost universal presidential pattern is to speak in laudatory platitudes and never to be indiscreet. Better to be pompous. This is not only what is routinely offered, but what is confidently expected and placidly accepted. I have concluded," said Kerr, "that it is a disservice to the presidency to speak otherwise." Kerr's advice bodes ill for this lecture series, of course. It suggests that I and other presidents have a choice between being pompous, in which case you will regret having invited me, or else being indiscreet, in which case I will regret having accepted. I will do my best to thread the needle. Despite his prudent counsel of rhetorical modesty, Kerr was enough of a public figure that he appeared on the cover of Time magazine, as did Yale's Kingman Brewster and Notre Dame's Theodore Hesburgh. But the list of university presidents, known to the American public has always been and should remain short. Our job is to lead our institutions, not to be public intellectuals. And Kerr was quite correct to counsel presidents to aim for prudent restraint rather than charismatic visibility on the public stage. Kerr was also, however, adamant about the importance of principled leadership to research universities. He insisted that, quoting him again now, "there are some things that should not be compromised, like freedom and quality. When those things are at risk," he said, "the university president needs to become a gladiator," his word, "and fight for the values that define our institutions." He was right about that too. Academic freedom and the quality of American universities now hang in the balance. If we do not clearly call out the wrongs that are taking place in, for example, the unlawful attacks on Harvard and the University of California system, then the public will assume that these intrusions are acceptable. They are not. Speaking out requires that we clarify the idea of academic freedom, explain why it matters to universities and to the nation, and reaffirm not just the privileges, but also the responsibilities that accompany it. Academic freedom is not a well-understood idea. People often confuse it with free speech, or they misunderstand it as a right that entitles professors to say or do whatever they like without losing their jobs. The latter idea might appeal to some faculty members for obvious reasons, but it is entirely unpalatable to the public for equally obvious reasons. Academic freedom is, however, different from free speech, and it carries with it responsibilities as well as privileges. As law professors Matthew Finken and Robert C. Post, and that's Matthew Finken, whom I have not met in the hat, that's his photo, and Robert Post, whom some of you at least may know because Robert Post was on the faculty of this law school for 20 years before moving to Yale and becoming the dean there. As law professors Matthew Finken and Robert C. Post put it in their excellent book entitled For the Common Good, Principles of Academic Freedom. Academic freedom consists of the freedom to pursue the scholarly profession according to the standards of that profession. Three important points follow from this concise formulation. First, unlike the principle of free speech, which generates rights that anyone can exercise, academic freedom yields rights for a specific group of people, those in the scholarly profession. Second, the rights created by the principle of academic freedom are in important respects broader than free speech rights. Academic freedom limits the ability of those, like me, who employ and pay professors to interfere with their teaching and research. Most employees enjoy no such rights. Third, academic freedom entails responsibilities as well as rights. Again, quoting Finken and Post, Academic freedom is not the freedom to speak or teach just as one wishes. It is the freedom to pursue the scholarly profession inside and outside the classroom according to the norms and standards of that profession. As such, academic freedom presupposes that professors may and indeed ought to be held accountable for compliance with the norms of that profession. Academic work is rigorously evaluated when scholars apply for jobs, come up for promotion, seek grants, submit papers for publication, and so on. Principles of academic freedom are thus inseparable from the research university's mission to advance, preserve, and disseminate knowledge. They are derived from and essential to that mission. Some people, including remarkably some university presidents, have suggested to me that because academic freedom is a privilege available only to scholars, it is destined to be unpopular, and that we should therefore avoid talking about it. They propose to talk about free speech instead. I could not disagree more. It is precisely because academic freedom is so closely tied to the scholarly profession that we must insist on it. Universities aim to advance knowledge, pursue truth, and deepen understanding through rigorous scholarship, not to allow students and faculty to say whatever they please. The basic idea of academic freedom, moreover, is straightforward and attractive. Scholars should make good faith judgments based on their learning, expertise, and careful reasoning, not in deference to the whims of the powerful. To quote once again from Finken and Post, the American public can be convinced to support academic freedom if they believe that universities have, on the whole, successfully fulfilled their function of producing valuable knowledge, and that this production would be seriously compromised were universities to circumscribe academic freedom. Under those conditions, public support for academic freedom will endure as long as the public need for the creation of knowledge. By referring to the production or creation of knowledge, Finken and Post seem to evoke scientific and technical pursuits, but the point holds more generally. To defend academic freedom, research universities must articulate clearly and defend forcefully the value of their scholarly mission to pursue truth, create and preserve knowledge, and deepen understanding. Universities must articulate that value, I would add, with regard both to the research they do and the teaching they provide. Research matters tremendously to our country, but the public will interact more with universities as educational institutions. If we do not defend the teaching mission of research universities, we will fight a losing battle. At this point, we run up against challenges that Clark Kerr identified and where I want to suggest some amendments to his analysis. As I noted on Tuesday, Kerr famously described the modern university as a multiversity, a series of communities and activities held together by a common name, a common governing board, and related purposes, including a shared concern for parking, as I think all of you know if you know Kerr's quotes. In his view, the modern university was not a true community. This is what Kerr said. The modern university was not a true community because a community should have a soul, a single animating principle, but the multiversity has several. Kerr paid special attention to the tension between teaching and research. The creation of the multiversity, he contended, had led to the valuing of research and service over teaching, with a particular neglect of undergraduates. I have this for you. With a particular neglect of undergraduates, resulting in a reorientation of the campus from internal instruction to external service concerns. Kerr analogized older versions of the university to villages. By contrast, the modern American multiversity, he said, was a city of infinite variety. That city, he said, is a confusing place for the undergraduate student who encounters the opportunities and dilemmas of freedom. The casualty rate is high, and the walking wounded are many. Running through all this is Kerr's explicit nostalgia for his own alma mater, the Swarthmore of the early 1930s, which he regarded as a true intellectual community, a place with a soul. He was not and is not alone in these views. A prominent strand of thinking about American higher education contends that the best learning is possible only through intimate humanistic seminars. For example, Andrew Delbanco's beautiful book, College, What It Was, Is, and Should Be, quotes Kerr's view about the corrosive effect of research on undergraduate teaching, laments that the college as a community of learning, I'm quoting Delbanco now, the college as a community of learning is for many students already an anachronism, and declares that a necessary condition for true collegiate learning is small class size. I too cherish the learning that can occur in small seminars, and I would like to see every student experience it at least once. Nevertheless, I worry that Kerr's fondness for his alma mater may have led him to underestimate the virtues of the research university model that he helped to create. I say this without denying any of Kerr's powerful and enduring insights. Yes, it is true, the modern American university has multiple purposes, competing constituencies, and distinct subcommunities. And yes, the tensions between teaching commitments and, research commitments and undergraduate teaching are real. And yes, size and complexity have serious disadvantages. But size, complexity, and a commitment to research also have powerful advantages, including, in my view, for undergraduate education. Indeed, Kerr's own description of research universities as cities of infinite variety is double-edged. Kerr says that cities can be confusing places for undergraduates. True enough, and confusion creates risk. It also, however, creates opportunities for insight and growth. Cities, precisely because of their size and complexity, may stimulate learning better than quiet villages. And without getting into any metaphysical debates about what it means for a place to be a true community, much less have a soul, great cities, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, for example, have real and vibrant identities. So too, I submit, do this country's great universities. Moreover, American universities have, despite their complexity, a powerful animating principle that unifies their various academic units, namely a devotion to the advancement of knowledge through rigorous scholarship. That commitment is on Kerr's own account, the multiversity's reason for being. The rise of the knowledge economy created the conditions for the modern American research university. Now, obviously, I'm not going to claim that this principle explains everything that goes on in the multiversity. In particular, I'm not going to claim that intercollegiate football is somehow about the advancement of knowledge. I look forward to it if somebody else wants to make that argument. Nor do I mean to say that the commitment to advanced knowledge is unique to research universities. It flourishes, for example, at many liberal arts colleges. What I want to stress is how pervasively the research ethos shapes leading American universities. For example, the Stanford educational historian David LeBary, whom I also quoted on Tuesday, notes that the trajectory of American professional schools has been altered by the research enterprise around them. LeBary observes that many people have lamented the increasing prestige of those schools by comparison to traditional liberal arts disciplines. He replies to this concern that the spirit of the liberal arts has increasingly defined the aspirations of professional schools, the best of which, like this one where I speak now, insist upon research distinction and value interdisciplinarity far more than they did in the past. The research ethos of American universities also defines a distinctive and vibrant approach to undergraduate education. The crucial claim that I want to make here is this. While it is true, as Kerr and many others insist, that there are tensions between research and undergraduate teaching, there are also powerful synergies between the two. In a society that depends critically upon expert knowledge, one kind of valuable education is a curriculum shaped by the research mission of a great university. Such a curriculum should demand that undergraduates learn one scholarly discipline in depth, expose them to other disciplines, give them opportunities to participate in research, and immerse them in an environment where they encounter the quest for knowledge, often and in many forms. Learning at a college or university involves not only mastering the norms and content of a student's major, but also adopting the practices, attitudes, and values that make research possible. Finken and Post argue that the production of knowledge requires not merely the negative liberty to speculate free from censorship, but also an affirmative commitment to the virtues of reason, fairness, and accuracy. They suggest that a central aim of American higher education is to instill in students a mature independence of mind that is acquired primarily through emulation of instructors who model independent thought in the classroom. I agree, and I would add, not just in the classroom. At Berkeley and other great universities, students encounter a wide array of speakers, workshops, events, research opportunities, and other exemplars, paradigmatic or contested, of independent-mindedness, scholarship, and expertise. All of this can indeed be confusing, frustrating, and exhausting. It can also be exhilarating, transformative, and illuminating. Kerr was right that a large multiversity will never enjoy the collegial intimacy of a small liberal arts college. But the research ethos, the colliding visions, and the swirl of activity at a great university have educational benefits of their own. Ideally, research universities should produce a certain kind of citizen well-suited to modern society, a person who understands what research and expertise are, who simultaneously respects the value of expertise and thinks critically about its limits and how they matter to democracy and the good life, who understands the joys as well as the uses of scholarship, and who manifests the attitudes and skills necessary to conduct it. That is an ideal, of course. Some students will glide through a great university without getting much of what I have described. But the small liberal arts college instruction that Andrew Delbanco described, or about which Clark Kerr reminisced, is likewise an ideal. Not all students who attend a small college will experience the spiritual and intellectual epiphanies that their best teachers cherish. Many excellent forms of collegiate education exist, and I have great admiration for America's liberal arts colleges as well as the nation's research universities. My point is not to say which form of education is best, but more modestly to identify a distinctive and valuable educational ideal associated with the research university. We should express that ideal clearly, defend it vigorously, and adhere to it steadfastly. To do that, universities must focus on their animating principle, namely the advancement of knowledge. That proposition may seem so banal as to offer no guidance, but I think that it helps to address a number of controversies. Let me offer some examples. One implication of what I have said is that research universities must continue to insist that scholarly excellence, judged by the application of rigorous academic standards, be the essential criterion for the hiring and promotion of faculty. Other criteria, such as public prominence or community engagement, should be of secondary importance at best. Disciplinary standards must likewise govern instructional goals, including in the undergraduate classroom. Faculty members should seek to convey knowledge in their field, including disputes and disagreements, as best they can, along with the attitudes, dispositions, and skills needed to interrogate, challenge, or build upon the current state of understanding. So long as professors meet their scholarly responsibilities, they may also be public intellectuals, or social activists, or commercial entrepreneurs. Their scholarship may provide a foundation for these pursuits. Faculty participation in public life may add to the vibrancy of the university, improve the world, and spark insights and questions that enhance existing scholarly projects or create new ones. None of that, however, displaces the fundamental point that research and teaching must aim at the pursuit of truth and the advancement of knowledge, and must be shaped and judged by criteria that are scholarly and academic, rather than political, ideological, or commercial. By the same token, political impartiality is a desirable goal for a scholar and a university, but political balance is an irrelevant criterion for assessing scholarship. Here again, Finken and Post point the way well. They say, following an argument by David Hollinger, also of this university, the concept of balance makes sense in the context of academic freedom only by reference to the professional norms of a relevant scholarly community. To teach a subject is to assume the responsibility of covering material that is understood by scholars in the field as essential to its comprehension. Political balance and political neutrality are political standards, not scholarly ones. Because academic freedom obligates scholars to use disciplinary standards, not political standards, to guide their teaching, any obligation of political balance or political neutrality would be flatly incompatible with a scholar's accountability. Another example involves the schools, departments, and programs devoted to civic life and leadership that are now popping up at universities around the country. I regard this development with some bemusement. I have devoted my life, my scholarly life at least, to American constitutionalism and political theory. I suppose that I should be heartened to see my professorial tribe suddenly ascendant, with entire schools devoted to it, after a period when jobs for political theorists were in short supply. And indeed, I have nothing but enthusiasm for these new programs, provided that they are genuinely devoted to the animating purpose of the research university, which is to say the advancement of knowledge, in this case about the institutions, principles, history, and underlying theories of American government and the civic realm more generally. The advancement of that knowledge requires ruthlessly impartial study of the strengths and the weaknesses, the successes and the failures, the wisdom and the fallacies of the United States and other polities. It must assume neither that America is just nor that it is unjust. I worry, however, that the proponents of these schools have in mind something different, namely a kind of education that nurtures love of country and reverence for American ideals. For example, Yuval Levin is an influential commentator on American higher education. He works for the American Enterprise Institute, which has played a significant role in the movement to create schools of civics. I agree with much that Levin says about universities. He rightly contends, for example, that the purpose of the university is, quoting him, ultimately the discovery, development, amassing, examination, and application of knowledge pursued through teaching and learning. Absolutely. Levin believes that the United States is home to an exceptional concentration of the greatest universities on earth. I agree. But he alleges that these universities are undergoing, quoting him, distortion by an increasingly hyper-aggressive culture of activism. Some of Levin's comments about activism, in my view, tend toward caricature, but I agree with him that scholarly standards, not activist agendas, must govern the assessment of teaching and research. Levin loses his way, however, when he attempts to describe the principles and objectives of liberal education. He identifies liberal education as the special province of, in his words, a small persistent band of tradition-minded humanist gadflies, and then quoting Leo Strauss as the counterpoison to mass culture. Levin offers the following contrast between activism and liberal education. I'm going to quote from him at length. The culture of social activism on campus is very much about raising consciousness about injustices we take for granted, and so showing us what we should know to be a good society, while the culture of liberal education seeks to raise consciousness about the wonderful cultural inherences we take for granted, and so showing us what we should know to sustain our civilizational treasures. Close quote. This is a false dichotomy, and one radically inconsistent with the aims of a research university. The advancement of knowledge requires that professors and students examine our cultural heritage without presupposing that it is either unjust or wonderful, and allowing for the possibility that it may be in different ways, both at once. Research universities have a distinctive educational ethic, which is different from the political aims of either social activism or cultural conservatism. To defend our universities, we must clearly articulate their educational mission. We must emphasize the synergies between research and undergraduate education, and we must insist that universities be steadfastly faithful to their animating purpose, which is the advancement of knowledge. University leaders must also defend the value of a college education in economic terms. And here I will now repeat some disclaimers that those of you in the audience on Tuesday will have heard already, but I want to make sure that I am not misunderstood. Of course, collegiate education has many purposes beyond the economic. Indeed, I have just been discussing its value to the formation of citizens. Students, families, and society all have reasons to value education other than its income-producing potential. Students should not choose colleges or majors simply to maximize income. And if they do, many will be unhappy and our society will be worse off. One must, moreover, measure economic value carefully. Clumsy or short-term metrics will produce misleading results. Disclaimers aside, however, nearly all parents and students do care about the economic returns on a college degree. Unless you are very affluent, you need to think about how to put food on the table and pay the rent. Legislators also care about the economic value of a college degree, which again is reasonable. If universities expect the government to subsidize college education, we need to be forthright about what society gets in return. University leaders should seek to ensure that economic assessments of college degrees are accurate and useful, rather than denying that such evaluations are at all appropriate. Here are two policies that I believe would take us in the right direction. First, good metrics depend on good data. Assessing the outcomes from college education is hard, partly because students transfer from one institution to another, making it difficult even to calculate true graduation rates. University leaders should therefore support, and Congress should enact, the College Transparency Act, which would improve data collection about enrollment, completion, and post-collegiate earnings while also protecting student privacy. It has bipartisan sponsorship in both the House and the Senate. Second, university leaders should highlight and address the completion crisis in American higher education. I emphasized in Tuesday's lecture that the returns on a 4-year degree are excellent, but that those returns depend upon whether or not you in fact get the degree. And I should acknowledge, based on conversations I've had since then, that claim is controversial within the room and within the profession. For many people who do not graduate, time spent in college turns out to be worse than nothing. At a minimum, they have foregone income by attending college rather than working. In many cases, they have spent money on tuition and taken on debt without getting sufficient value in return. These facts matter tremendously because the average 6-year graduation rate at American colleges hovers around 60%. Roughly 10% of Americans now fall into the some college, no degree category. Politicians and pundits talk frequently about college costs. We ought to focus more on America's completion crisis. Costly degrees may have a high return on investment. Incomplete education can waste both public and private resources. When I raise this issue, people sometimes reply that it is easy to have high graduation rates at selective colleges that have extensive resources and enroll only well-prepared students. At schools that provide opportunity to a wider range of students, graduation rates will inevitably be lower. I agree that it would be a terrible mistake to expect every college to match the sky-high graduation rates at Berkeley or Princeton. There are success stories, however, at schools with much less selective admission processes. So about 100 miles from where we are today is the campus of the California State University at Stanislaus. According to the federal government's college scorecard, and the data are up here, Cal State Stanislaus admits about 97% of its applicants, takes 57% of its students from families eligible for federal Pell Grants, achieves graduation rates of 71% for its overall student body and 70% for its Pell students, and produces a substantial boost in the earning power of its graduates. I have highlighted Cal State Stanislaus in particular because until recently its president was my friend Dr. Alan Jun, an alumnus of my university. But the numbers are comparably impressive at several other Cal State campuses. Money Magazine, which produces a consumer report style rating of colleges based on return on investment rather than reputation. I'm not a fan, although we do quite well at Princeton, and the U.S. News and World Report, which is very focused on prestige. This ranking I like better because, like Consumer Reports, it doesn't produce a rank order listing of colleges and does it on one limited criteria, which is return on investment, which is relevant but not decisive for families. Last year, it gave its highest 5-star ranking to only 40 colleges and universities. If you can read that slide, congratulations, your prescription is up to date and your eyesight is perfect. If you cannot, let me tell you that there are 40 schools up there with the 5-star ranking. They do include both Berkeley and Princeton, but 8 of the 40, 20%, were Cal State campuses right alongside Berkeley, Princeton, and other highly selective universities. Should we expect all colleges and universities to match the completion rates at the Cal State campuses? I do not know the answer to that question, but I am 100% certain that we should be asking that question, both in the academic community and in the halls of Congress. I am also 100% certain that at some point, low completion rates become indefensible, no matter what constituency a college serves. Noble intentions cannot excuse the harm done to students who end up with significant debt, but not a degree that can earn them back the power to repay it. Addressing the completion crisis should be a matter of bipartisan consensus. Indeed, some years ago, Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware, and the late Senator Johnny Isakson, Republican from Georgia, introduced the Aspire Act to Congress. It would have required institutions with low graduation rates to raise them, and it would have required institutions with high graduation rates to serve more Pell students. I did not agree with all the details and mechanisms contained in the Aspire Act, but I think the basic idea was exactly right. Unfortunately, the bipartisan Aspire Act met the expected fate of creative, pragmatic, and bipartisan legislation in today's polarized and partisan Washington. It went nowhere. University leaders can and should, of course, work together voluntarily without federal intervention to increase completion rates at their institutions and to take up the rates of Pell students that they serve. The American Talent Initiative, which I co-chaired for a period of years along with President Milliken's predecessor, President Michael Drake, which includes the University of California at Berkeley, which I co-chair now with Juan Munoz, the chancellor at Merced, is a coalition. The American Talent Initiative is a coalition of high completion rate colleges, including Princeton and the UC system, that have increased their aggregate Pell enrollments by roughly 70,000 students over the past decade. Meanwhile, high Pell enrollment schools, including the City University of New York and Georgia State University, have found innovative, low-cost ways to increase completion rates for at-risk student populations. This kind of leadership and cooperation will be essential as universities navigate the crisis that now confronts us and has provided the impetus for these lectures. Let me conclude by recapping what I have said about that crisis. Clark Kerr recognized more than 60 years ago that federal investment in university research had simultaneously supercharged the quality of those institutions, increased their value to the American public, and rendered them vulnerable to dangerous forms of federal intervention that might compromise academic freedom. Over the intervening period, universities underwent three fundamental changes. They became heavily dependent on federally subsidized student borrowing. They engaged in hyper-intense, stratified national competition focused more on improving quality rather than reducing cost. And they became the focal point of American conflicts about affirmative action. All three developments made the political position of leading research universities more precarious. Student debt burdens are hugely unpopular. Applicants and their families resent rejection by colleges that are seen as gateways to success. The long-running battle over affirmative action put colleges at the epicenter of an intense and polarizing political controversy. These developments are by no means solely or even principally responsible for the crisis facing colleges today, but they have eroded political support for universities at a time when they face unprecedented attacks. University presidents and other academic leaders must respond to the crisis by more clearly articulating, staunchly defending, and resolutely adhering to the principles that define their universities. University presidents must therefore speak up clearly and courageously for academic freedom. Professors must be able to research, teach, and publish on the basis of their good faith scholarly judgments, unimpaired by what powerful people or democratic majorities want them to say. Universities must also insist upon and live up to the responsibilities that justify academic freedom and make universities valuable to the American polity. More specifically, universities and their leaders must aim first and foremost at the advancement of knowledge and must not compromise on that mission on the basis of a desire to advance social justice, political balance, love of country, or other ideological objectives. We should also embrace reasonable, nuanced efforts to measure and improve the value of a college education, including by increasing completion rates. We cannot expect the government to invest boldly in higher education if universities timidly resist demands to prove their worth. None of these recommendations guarantee success. The path ahead is hard and the risks are real. There is nevertheless reason for hope. The achievements of American research universities over the past century would have been impossible without sustained support from the American people and their elected representatives. Americans take justifiable pride in the successes of these institutions. The recent attacks on universities have been unpopular with much of the public. Great universities improve our country's health, prosperity, and security, deepen its culture, and enhance its civic life. They are American treasures. For all of us in or connected to the scholarly community, it is our responsibility and our privilege to defend these marvelous institutions at a time when they urgently require our dedication and effort. It has been my privilege to share these thoughts with you. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
As on Tuesday, I wrote down my own questions to hold us over until we can get some of the questions from the audience. So let me start with one. When you showed that list of the 40 top 5-star universities, I was struck that 18 out of those 40 were in California.
Yeah, I was struck by that too.
And 14 of them were public.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about the role of public versus private universities in how you in the various themes that you raised, in how we confront the three kind of structural trends, in your endorsement of what you called, I think, intimate humanistic seminars, where I think a public university is going to tend more towards a mass production model necessarily, and also in terms of thinking about academic freedom. How do we make the case? Is there a tension between academic freedom and the fact that the taxpayers are being asked not just to tolerate it, but to pay for it?
Yeah. Well, of course, that's true in various ways for both public and private institutions. And Jesse, I'm inclined to resist the premise of the question a bit and say, look, it really is true. We can ask about the differences between public and private institutions, but I think there is, first of all, common cause to be made right now around a number of questions about academic freedom and research that research universities in general share, and that there may be a more productive set of questions to ask even about the facts that provoke you around this. So let me say a few things, right? I am also struck by the number of California publics that are on that list. And look, let me say one thing here, right? If you expand that to 4.5 stars, which is a little harder to do, I mean, I would never suggest anybody to take the 4 versus 5 distinction really seriously. But I do think the question for me is, and I look forward to hearing from you and others about this, California is clearly doing something right with these institutions, I would say, unless these numbers are all, tell me that too, right, that they're deceiving. And I think the right question for the United States to ask is not what's the difference between public and private here, but all right, here's a public system that is really achieving something quite extraordinary. I think that Clark Kerr may deserve some of the credit for the initial launch, and many others deserve credit for the quality of what's happening here across multiple systems. But for me, that's the most productive question. When you talk about public versus private and smaller experiences, look, there are extraordinary smaller publics. The College of New Jersey in my state, which I think is at 4.5 stars on that list, the College of William and Mary, which is better known in Virginia. There are some other small colleges that do provide the liberal arts experience in a public setting. I think it is good in general to have the kind of the diversity of the American system providing a wide range of choices to students. I do think it's a reasonable question to ask at publics whether or not there are ways, as I said, to get a single seminar of the kind that Anthony Del Banco describes, for which I have great sympathy, to at least some part of the student body that might want that. And I think it really matters to resist. And for all my admiration for Clark Kerr, this is the one place where I feel there's a need to resist. Very important to identify what it is that makes the education at a research university distinctive despite those differences. I think there's a lot to be said about public and private, although I also think it is one of the great strengths of our country that we have both. Let me say something about the last, which is just this question about funding, the government's funding of these institutions. It is a remarkable thing, right, that states have set up public universities. And then even more remarkable that they have allowed them, in some sense, to be centers of free inquiry that can be irritating or critical to the state, and through much of our history protected them because of the extraordinary benefits that flow from that combination. That can be at risk both for state universities, and it is at risk right now for privates. I mean, the fact that both Harvard and the University of California system are equally in the crosshairs, I would say, indicates there's not a difference there. And I think what we are obliged to do is to both be as steadfastly faithful to our model that has justified over time the American public's and the California public's confidence in these institutions, and then make the case for that. And I continue to believe, at least, we had the Undersecretary for Museums at the Smithsonian, who was appointed in the Biden administration, continues in the Trump administration. We honored him at Princeton. He had a question like this. He said, look, people do believe in knowledge, and I think that is still there, and we need to capitalize on that. Doesn't mean everybody does, but we can't give up on that. We cannot give up on that. We're not going to win as universities if we do.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to combine a few questions because there are far more than we'll ever get through, and more than I'll even be able to look at up here. So institutional engagement necessarily increases public visibility of university leadership. Is there a risk that engagement becomes personalized? And if so, what safeguards ensure that it serves the university's intellectual mission rather than the leader's public presence? And I'll tack on a question that I see as related. In view of your interest in the First Amendment and diversity, how has Princeton stayed out of the crosshairs set by the current administration?
Yeah. So look, let me begin by accepting the premise of the first question, which is that there is a risk if somebody is speaking up that it becomes about that individual's advantage rather than about the institution or the sector. I think it is very important right now that university presidents, to the extent they are able, be speaking up not only for their own institution, but for the sector, for American higher education, and particularly for research universities, which are under attack. I'm not sure there's a guarantee around that. It's possible to have counterexamples where people are doing something different. I will say I believe, I look at my friend Rich Lyons here and at President Milliken. Most of us who go into these jobs, that doesn't mean all of us, but most of us who go into these jobs and leave our scholarly careers in order to enter administration and leadership and take on all the burdens that go with it, do so because of our love of the institutions that have made possible the lives in which we have found value and where we have seen the value that they give to students and others. And I think those values, which should anchor any university president in whatever they do, are critical to answering that first question. But there's not a guarantee. It's a reasonable point. The question about Princeton, I don't know. I mean, look, there but for the grace of God go we. As I made this judgment to speak up, and I was talking to a class in the School of Education earlier and said this, I lost a great deal of sleep before deciding that I was going to speak up when Columbia was attacked. But I decided at that time that my institution could be attacked, whether I spoke up or not. And if I was going to speak up, the time to speak up was when somebody else was being attacked rather than waiting when it was just an expression of self-interest. So the risks are real. And, we've had, I think all of us, I was talking to some of your institutional leaders earlier about this. All of us are under attacks, some of which have been reported, some of which have not been reported, and we are all dealing with a great deal of trouble. I'll just leave it there.
Okay. I apologize for changing gears, but it's having trouble with managing all these. So what can we do to help the public understand and appreciate universities as you described them? How do we bridge that appreciation?
Yes. So look, I think there are many parts of this, and some of it is you have to decide what public you want to reach. It's very hard to change the minds of the entire American public. That requires a kind of a massive advertising campaign. The Association of American Universities is doing some of that kind of advertising in some markets, but it takes a lot of reinforcement to get that message out there. That's different from changing the minds of legislators and their staffs, a lot of which is done through face-to-face conversation. And I think doing those conversations, we have to be willing to be self-critical about what it is that we are doing. We have to clearly understand what our mission is. We have to say what that mission is. We have to listen to the criticisms, and we have to decide whether they are valid from the standpoint of our own mission. And then we have to be willing to speak back where we disagree with what is being done. I think, as I said in response to an earlier question, one begins from a stronger foundation there than people sometimes think. I mean, the evidence of that is there in what parents and students think when they are applying to our institutions. They want to come to places like Berkeley and Princeton. It's present. There was a Lumina Foundation study, which I may have mentioned, I can't recall, the Tuesday session where students were recent graduates and students were surveyed about a lot of the bugaboos that are in the press today. And the results were quite different from what you get if you just survey the general public that is disconnected to these institutions. And I will tell you, maybe more surprisingly, when I go to Congress, you still hear the bipartisan recognition that education and research do matter. And we have some evidence of that. If you look at the appropriation levels for the NSF and the NIH and the National Endowment for the Humanities that came out after budgets that were proposing radical cuts to these. So I don't want to be Panglossian about this. It is a very hard world. It's not the best of all possible worlds, but there is a foundation there to which we can speak.
Okay, thank you. That may be your answer to this next question, but I'll try it anyway and see what you think. There were two related questions, so I'm going to take both of them. One is the Vannevar Bush model of federally funded research now broken? And what can replace it? And there was a related question about Pell Grants.
Yeah.
Also a collaboration between the federal government and private and public institutions. Yes. Also potentially endowed in a more polarized world.
Well, so I'm going to answer this the same way I did. A New York Times reporter asked me this question, what's going to happen to the model? I said, I don't know what's going to happen to the model. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not in the business of prediction. I can tell you that I know to the core of my being what should happen, right? Which is that it would be a tremendous mistake for the United States to abandon the Vannevar Bush model. And unless you're playing the prediction markets or something, I don't know why you need to know the answer to the first one. I know it defines my job description that we have to be defending the research funding and the funding for education, especially for students from low-income families, that comes from the federal government. As I said in another of these interviews, I do know what will happen if the model collapses. There's not a replacement for it, right? We have had the best universities in the world because of the combination of this commitment to academic freedom and the commitment to fund research that's in the interests of the American people. And we're all out trying to raise money from philanthropic sources. We're all trying to be as creative and entrepreneurial as we can be about other ways of funding what goes on, and we all want to control our costs. None of that is going to be sufficient if the federal government decides that it wants to stop doing the things that have made this the country that top students and scholars and innovators from around the world want to come to. We have to continue that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take one question of my own now. So last year
You're going to do what?
I'm going to use one of my own questions.
You're going to use one of your own questions, okay.
Last year I toured a lot of colleges with my son who was looking at colleges. I should have charged it to my research account because I learned a lot from it. But one thing I heard over and over again was parents questioning the economic value, and in particular questioning the worried that their children might be diverted from high-value subjects to low-value subjects. And we could dispute their assessments of which ones are high economic value and which ones are low, but surely there are some subjects that have more of an economic return than others. In your discussion, you emphasize the importance we have to pay attention to the economic return, and I think that's right. How do you defend fields that might not do so well on that calculation that we think are still important to the pursuit of truth?
Yeah, so as I said, I think it's important for people to know what the return on investment is and to have this information available to them. I think it'd be foolish for people to make their decisions on that basis, or certainly on that basis alone. You're going to go through life in a particular vocation. Ideally, you're going through life in a vocation that matters to you and produces joy and a sense of mission from what it is that you do. And that's not going to be the same for everybody. There may be people who find that going into investment banking provides them with that sense of satisfaction and that sense that what they're doing for the world matters. For a large number of students, that's just not going to be the case. And likewise with regard to a degree in engineering. And one of the things that is extraordinary and I think comes out of this economic data for, I suspect, all the schools that you said son? Or is it?
Yes,
yeah,
my
son.
son. Yeah.
All the schools that your son was looking at, is that if what you want to do is make an income substantially higher than you would make as simply a high school graduate and with the capacity to support a family and pursue a meaningful career, you have lots of choices about what it is you should do. So my advice, I address the parents of our incoming class at Princeton every year, and the advice that I give to them is, look, at some point your child is going to give you a phone call and tell you that they're taking something that you can't see the relevance of, and maybe they're about to major in something that you can't see the relevance of. You should support them in doing that, because the kind of ability to think and reason and the independence of mind, as I put it in the lecture, that are cultivated in these pursuits will matter, and where we get the benefit from both publicly and individually from what institutions do is in releasing people to pursue their curiosity. I know I had to take that my own advice, and successfully did, when my son, who studied at the University of Chicago, was doing a foreign study program and told me what he was studying in Santiago, Chile, and it was the Mapuche Indian language, and I felt myself starting to say, and I thought, Chris, you can't say that. And my advice was right, even if my instincts were not. The other thing I would say, Jesse, is we also have to be willing to subsidize, as a society, particular professions and pursuits that may be very important for society, but that may not be economically remunerative. So there's also a question there in terms of what's the good for society. That's not being captured by these earnings numbers either. But the only claim I want to make is it's a mistake to ignore those numbers. And as your question indicates, because these parents, they're going to get a good deal, I actually think, on their education, even if you just measure it in economic terms. But they are very concerned about this issue, and it's not shocking that they're concerned, right? My wife and I were quite concerned about whether our son would be able to get a job after he graduated. Pleased to report that he was.
Lots of demand for Mapuche.
Lots of what?
Demand for Mapuche.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll ask one more question, and then I think we're out of time. One of the big trends that I've heard lots of university leaders worrying about recently was not one of your big three themes that's gotten to here, but the coming demographic cliff, it's sometimes called, the decline in the number of students who will be the right age to go to college. How do you see that interacting with all of the trends?
Yeah. So look, I would actually say there are a number of things that I didn't consider, right? I don't want to make any claim to comprehensiveness. And if one that is interesting that I didn't talk about is the increasingly global character in terms of their student bodies and other characteristics of American colleges and universities. And I tried to focus, rather than on just the surrounding conditions in American society, where we could name several, on kind of the structure of these institutions in some way, and that might have changed to alter the model of the American university. Look, the demographic cliff may well require a contraction in the set of institutions that exists in the United States. On the other hand, it may also be true that because there are a number of students who could benefit from a college degree who are not now going to college, that if we respond appropriately and if we provide the kind of funding that is needed to support some of those students, that there will be additional college-ready students, even if there's a lower college-aged population. There's also, of course, and this is a growing part of the population already at many colleges and universities, a non-traditionally aged population that would benefit either from going back to college or from going to college. But I think, Jesse, what universities and the leadership of the sector have to be willing to do is take a hard look at those economic questions. I think it would betray our kinds of commitments to say, all right, the right answer to that is to say whatever it is that would allow all existing colleges and universities to continue to operate as much like they have in the past. That would be the wrong way to approach that question. But I think we can approach it in a way that is appropriately respectful of the important mission served by all of these different institutions in the United States.
Thank you. With that, let me thank you again for 2 extraordinary lectures.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Plaque to lay down your luggage on your way home.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know how I'm going to get that home, but yes.
We can bail it to
Thank you for that. I will say I have felt like I'm in clover being out here at the University of California at Berkeley for the last couple of days. So you didn't need to give me a plaque. It was enough of a treat just to spend time with you. Thank you so much.